Hello students, myself Johnson. Welcome to the digital initiative taken by the MMSK. Hope in this time of medical emergency, you all are staying at your own home with your lovely parents.
Hello students of class 7. Today I am going to start and the first story of the first part from the Arabian Nights, and that is the extended reading novel book for class 7. So let's start the part 1 and first story, the first voyage. So long ago, when Harun al-Rashid was the ruler of Baghdad, there lived a poor man named Hindbad who earned his livelihood by carrying other people's goods from place to place as a porter. So, in the first part, first para, we are getting the name of Hindbad. He was a porter. So generally, he was content with his job, but there were occasions when he used to grumble. But once, when he tired out by the weight he was carrying, he sat down to rest outside the house of a very rich man named Sindbad. So Hindbad sit just in front of the house of the Sindbad. Don't get confused between the names. Hindbad was a potter and Sindbad was the very rich man of Baghdad. So there he heard some soft music and smelt a rare fragrance coming from inside. He felt very sad at the difference between his fate and that of the man whose name was so much like his own. Why am I poor and he so rich? Hindbad said loudly. Am I not as good a man as he? So now he is having a doubt about himself, that was he not as good a man like Sindbad? Sindbad heard these words from inside and called for the speaker. Hindbad was brought into the splendid hall where Sindbad was feasting with his friends. He gave Hindbad a seat right next to himself and asked him to have a meal with him. After finishing the meal, Sindbad asked, "Tell me, why are you grumbling at your fate?" So he was grumbling at his fate, and that is heard by Sindbad, because Hindbad was sitting just outside of the Sindbad's house. So he is asking the same question to Hindbad. "Pardon me, my lord, I was weary and sad," he replied. "Don't fear," said Sindbad kindly. "I do not blame you for your words. But listen how hard I worked to earn the riches I now enjoy. Listen to the story of my life." With that, Sindbad started his story. So that's a very common thing, that whenever we are expecting or seeing any rich person in front of our house, like Mukesh Ambani in Mumbai, or the Bill Gates, or the Microsoft owner, we are thinking about them, that how they became so rich, or they born in a rich family. uh, we have many thoughts about these kinds of things. So there is a story behind every successful person, and that also happened to Sindbad. So now he is sharing his struggle, his life story with Hindbad to inspire him. I was a young man when my father died. He left behind a very large fortune, nearly all of which I spent in enjoyment. Then I thought that I had to do something with the little money left with me. So I bought some goods and sailed for the Persian Gulf, hoping to make some profit there. The ship halted at many small islands and we did business. So, in the first part of his description, he described about his father's death, and after that incident he had a very little money in his hand, and with that money he started a business to sell some goods to the ships. One day, as our ship could not move farther due to a lack of wind for sailing, we saw a little green patch peeping above the water. Some of us rowed to it with some wood for fire and food to hold a feast there. So, when he was on the ship got stuck in between the sea. Just there was no wind, just because of that. So, at that time, they saw a green patch on the water level, and they rowed up to it with some wood and food to have a feast over there. We all were having a feast there when we found that the green patch on which we were feasting was nothing but a back of a huge sea monster. So they were unable to understand that they were feasting above the backside of a huge sea monster. But soon after they realized that what happened, the creature shook its body and lashed its tail, and everybody else was either into a boat or into the sea. Soon all except me were safely aboard the ship, and it sailed away, leaving me on the monster's back. So everyone else except him uh, went safely aboard the ship, and he only left with the monster's back. On the monster's back, the huge creature dived into the water. I should have gone too, but seizing a large piece of wood, I kept myself afloat all day and night. I kept tossing on the waves. At last, I was thrown onto the shore of a real island. So he was swimming above a wood, and after a long time, he got a real island. And what happened after that? I felt hot and hungry, so I dragged myself to the middle of the island where I found a few herbs. I ate them and drank some cool water from a clean and clear spring. I felt better. So, after reaching the island, he got some herbs and water for drink. After that, he felt some relieved. Wishing to see this place, I walked on until I met a man who took me to a cave in which there were many other men. They were the servants of the ruler of the island, who were present there to fetch his horses back to the palace. So he met a man, and he took him to their caves, and they were actually the servants of the ruler of that island. So it was lucky for him. And in what way, or in which way is it was lucky for him, let's find out. It was lucky for me to have met them that day. I could never have found the day to other side of the island on my own. These people were kind. They gave me food to eat and took me with them when they set out on their journey, and presented me before the king. He listened to my story and offered me to stay with him as long as I wished. So not only the people of that island, but also the king of that island, or the ruler of the island, was very kind to him, and he offered job and shelter to him. The cheap city where I made my house was built on the seashore. I spent a great deal of time watching ships and talking to the merchants. So that's the job for him. For his job, he can talk to many merchants. I paid a daily visit to the king, and I had also grown friendly with some of the residents. They were Indians and very wise indeed. So here is a compliment for Indians, that they were very wise on that island. So one day, the very ship in which I had sailed out from Bussorah came into the harbor. It still had all those bundles of goods which I had bought, and on which my name was clearly written. Then I asked for my goods. The sailor looked at me in surprise. So one day, what happened? The same ship came on the island over the harbor, on which he sailed for the first time on the sea. So he can see the bundle of goods that he bought for sale, and he asked for his goods to the sailor. And what happened? The sailor was totally surprised after seeing him. How can you be Sindbad? He asked. When I myself saw him drowned. I believe you are lying to get these goods. So, firstly, and the sailor was not uh, believing the words of that person, and that you cannot be Sindbad because I saw him drowned. So you were just telling lie to get these goods. When several other sailors spoke for my being Sindbad indeed, he let me have the goods at last. So at last he got his goods. What happened after that? I looked through the bundle, carried the very best to the king, and asked him to accept the same as a gift. So he brought all the goods from that ship and presented them to the king of that island he was living as a gift. He took my costly present with great pleasure and gave me one oath far more in return. I then sold or exchanged the rest of my goods, bade good bye to His Majesty, set sail for Bussorah, taking with me the articles made me on the island, and this I sold for a large sum of money. So from that profit he sailed for Bussorah. He's returning back after gaining so much of money from that island with his goods also. On finishing the story of my first voyage, Sindbad ordered the band to play again. As the poor man enjoyed himself greatly, the rich man gave him a purse full of money and asked him to come the next day to listen to more of his stories. Hindbad was delighted at his good fortune. So that's the first story about the first voyage of Sindbad. He described it to Hindbad. Hindbad was a poor man, and he enjoyed the situation, the behavior of the rich man like Sindbad very greatly, and he got some money also from Sindbad, and Sindbad asked him to come on the next day for listening the next story. So that's the first story, or the first voyage from part 1 from the Arabian Nights. Hope you have understood the first story of it, and I will upload the question answers from it very soon. Stay tuned for more updates. Thank you for watching.